This story was sent to us by a listener named Cassie Harlow from Boise, Idaho. Cassie says she almost did not send this in because she was worried people would think she had lost her mind. She spent 3 weeks going back and forth about whether to share it before she finally typed it all out and hit send at 2 in the morning because, in her words, she needed someone else to tell her she was not crazy. Cassie, you are not crazy. And what happened to you on that highway in October is something that we at Bella Dark Tales take very seriously. So settle in, everyone. Turn off the lights if you are feeling brave. And let us go somewhere that, according to every map in existence, should not exist at all. The last thing my GPS said to me before everything went wrong was turn left in 300 feet. There was no road there. There was no left. There was nothing but a field in the dark and the fog rolling in off the hills. And yet the arrow on my screen was pointing left as confidently and calmly as it had pointed me through every normal turn for the last 2 hours. And God help me, I almost turned. My name is Cassie Harlow. I am 29 years old and I live in Boise, Idaho, and I want to be very clear up front about something. I am not the kind of person who believes in portals. I am not someone who watches videos about interdimensional travel or reads forums about places where the fabric of reality gets thin. I was, before the night of October the 14th, a completely practical person with a completely practical relationship with technology. I trusted my GPS the way I trusted my car's engine. It was a tool. It worked. It got me where I needed to go. I do not trust it anymore. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how it started, because the start is important. The start is what makes this so difficult to dismiss, even now, even 14 months later when I have had plenty of time to come up with rational explanations and apply them aggressively to every part of this story. The start is ordinary in a way that makes what came after it feel even more wrong. The way a perfectly normal sentence becomes terrifying when the last word is not what it should be. I was driving from Boise to Twin Falls. That is it. That is the whole premise. I was making a drive I had made probably 30 times in my life, 2 hours down Interstate 84, straight shot, dead simple. I was going to visit my college friend Renata Vasquez, who had recently moved to Twin Falls with her partner James, and I was planning to spend the weekend there, come back Sunday evening. I had packed a bag. I had a full tank of gas. I had a large coffee from the Dutch Brothers near my apartment, and a playlist I had been putting together for about a week. It was a Friday evening in October, 6:30 when I left, still just barely light enough to see the hills to the south. I had used my GPS for the first part of the drive not because I needed it for the interstate but because I needed it for the last part, finding Renata's new address in a neighborhood I was not familiar with. So I plugged in her address, set it going, and mostly ignored it for the first hour and a half because it was just telling me to stay on the interstate, which I was obviously going to do. The first thing I noticed happened at about the 8 o'clock mark. I was somewhere between Mountain Home and the Bliss area, that stretch of 84 that runs through high desert country, the kind of landscape that is beautiful in the daytime and gets very big and very empty feeling after dark. The interstate out there is not heavily trafficked on a Friday night. There are stretches where you can go several minutes without seeing another set of headlights. It is not alarming if you are used to it, and I was used to it. But it does mean that when something unusual happens, there is nobody around to confirm that you are seeing what you think you are seeing. What happened at 8 o'clock was this. My GPS, which had been giving me the calm, steady voice telling me to continue on the current road for 47 miles or whatever it was, suddenly said something different. It said recalculating. And I thought, okay, that happens. Sometimes the signal drops. Sometimes the app gets a new traffic update. I glanced at the screen and the map looked normal except for one thing. The route line, which had been running along the interstate in that familiar blue line that GPS apps use, had shifted. It was no longer following the interstate. It had moved off to the south, down a road that I did not recognize, curving away from the highway through country I could not identify in the dark. I looked back at the road. I looked back at the screen. The blue line was still going south. The voice said, "In 6 miles, take exit 212 toward Clover Creek Road." I knew that highway. I had driven it before. There is an exit in that area, a couple of them actually, leading down into the Snake River Canyon country south of the interstate. Not somewhere I needed to go to get to Twin Falls. Twin Falls is accessed by continuing east on 84 and then coming down 93, not cutting south through the canyon area west of the city. This route made no sense. I assumed it was a glitch. I pressed the button to go back to the original route. The app recalculated. The blue line went back to the interstate. The voice said, "Continue on I-84 east for 31 miles. Good. Fine." I relaxed a little, took a sip of my coffee, turned my playlist back up. 4 minutes later, the app said recalculating again. And the blue line went south again. Same exit. Same route. Clover Creek Road, heading south toward the canyon. I canceled it again. I typed Renata's address in from scratch. The app recalculated from my current position and this time gave me the correct route, interstate all the way, exactly what I expected. I watched the screen for a moment to make sure it was stable, and it appeared to be. I let out a breath and kept driving. 2 minutes after that, recalculating. South again. Okay, so at this point I was mildly annoyed but not actually worried. GPS apps glitch. Everybody knows this. I had had my app do weird things before, tried to take me on weird alternate routes, suddenly decide that a road that was clearly faster was somehow not the optimal path. Technology does strange things. I was not scared. I was just a little irritated. I silenced the GPS audio, decided I would just drive the route I knew and pulled the GPS back up when I got closer to Twin Falls and actually needed it to navigate the neighborhood. Problem solved. I had driven this route enough times that I could do the interstate part without guidance. I drove for another 20 minutes in silence, or near silence, just my playlist. The interstate ran east through the dark. The headlights of occasional trucks came toward me from the west and then were gone. The hills on either side were black shapes against a sky that was clear and very full of stars, the way the sky gets out in that part of Idaho when you are far enough from any city that the light pollution fades away. It was actually very beautiful in a bleak and enormous way. I remember noticing that and feeling okay. Feeling like everything was fine. Then I looked at the GPS screen, just habit, just a glance. The blue line was going south again. Except this time I had not recalculated. I had not touched the app. The audio was off and the app was still showing, as far as I could tell, running normally in the background. And without any input from me, it had plotted a new route. Going south. And this time it was not taking me to Clover Creek Road. It was taking me further. The route line on the screen extended south off the interstate, and then kept going, off roads that I could recognize, into terrain that on the screen was just gray, the color the app uses for unplotted country, land without roads, land that the map does not know about. The blue line was heading into gray country. And then the app spoke, even though I had muted it. It said, "In 2 miles, take exit 207. I pressed the mute button again. The voice stopped. I looked at the exit number. 207. That was not an exit I recognized. I was pretty sure there was not an exit 207 in that stretch of highway. I had driven this road many times and I was fairly certain the exit numbers in that area jumped from around 203 to about 218 because there was a big gap in between where there was just nothing, just canyon country, and no roads accessing the interstate. 207 did not exist. I want to pause here and really let that sink in, because when I describe the escalation of this night, what I am about to tell you is where I went from mildly unsettled to genuinely disturbed. A GPS suggesting a weird alternate route is one thing. A GPS directing you to an exit that does not exist is something else entirely. I kept my eyes on the road and watched my odometer. If there was an exit at the mile 207 marker, I would come to it in about a mile and a half from where I was. I watched the road. I watched the signs. I passed a sign that read exit 203, Hammett 2 miles. I knew that exit. It was real. I passed it a minute later. A small well-lit exit ramp, a gas station sign visible in the distance, completely normal. Then there was nothing. Dark highway. No exits. No signs. I passed the mile 205 marker, and nothing changed. I passed 206. Still nothing. The GPS was counting down. It said in half a mile, take exit 207. I was watching the road ahead of me. The headlights were on high beam and I could see a good distance ahead. There was nothing there. No exit ramp. No sign. Just the highway going east through the dark. The GPS said, take exit 207 now. I was at the 207 marker. I know because I saw it. And there was nothing there. There was no exit. There was no road. There was the highway and there was the median barrier, and there was the dark desert on either side, and that was it. And then something happened that I still cannot fully explain and have turned over in my mind approximately 1,000 times since. I saw a light. It was off to the right. To the south. Just for a second, maybe 2 seconds. A light that was not the right color for a farmhouse or a gas station. It was not the warm yellow of artificial lighting. It was not the bluish white of an LED. It was a color I am going to struggle to describe to you, and I want to try to do it accurately because the color matters, I think. It was a green. Not a bright neon green. Not the green of a traffic light. It was a pale, almost gray green, like something phosphorescent, like the color of something that makes its own light in the deep ocean. It was there for 2 seconds and then it was gone. And in those 2 seconds I had the most intense and irrational urge to pull over and get out of my car and walk toward it that I have ever experienced. I did not do that. I kept driving. But the urge was so strong that it surprised me. It was not a thought. It was not a decision. It was a pull, a physical pull, like a current. Like something was trying to drag me sideways. I gripped the wheel tighter, and I kept driving east. The GPS said recalculating. I exhaled. I almost laughed. I thought, okay. Weird light, probably a drone or some piece of agricultural equipment, or something completely mundane. Weird GPS, probably a software glitch. I would get to Twin Falls, have a glass of wine with Renata, and have a good story to tell at dinner. Except the app recalculated again. And this time the route it gave me made even less sense. It had me getting off the next exit, number 218, and then driving south, not toward Twin Falls, not on any road that was taking me anywhere near my destination, but south and then east on roads that got progressively smaller on the map. State routes giving way to county roads giving way to what looked like dirt tracks, and then the blue line went off the map again, into gray again, into the uncharted area. And it kept going. It went south and east through the gray for what looked on the screen like a considerable distance, and at the end of the route line, where the destination marker should have been, Where Renata's address should have been, there was nothing. The pin that marks your destination was there, but it was sitting in the middle of the gray uncharted zone with no address attached to it. No street name. No landmark. Just a pin in the middle of nowhere with a time estimate that said, and I am not making this up, 44 minutes. 44 minutes to a place that did not exist on any map. I pulled over. I know, you are not supposed to stop on the interstate shoulder, but I needed to stop. I put my hazard lights on and I sat there on the shoulder of I-84 in the dark and I looked at my phone screen for a long time. I closed the GPS app entirely. I opened it again and typed Renata's address in from scratch, very carefully, double-checking every character. The app accepted the address and generated a route. A correct route. The right route. Interstate to Twin Falls, 42 minutes from my current position. I sat with that for a moment. 2 minutes difference between the normal route and the route to nowhere. 2 minutes. Whatever the app thought was at the end of that impossible southern route, it apparently thought it was almost exactly as far as Renata's actual house. I did not think about that too hard. I pulled back onto the highway and drove. For about 15 minutes, everything was normal. The GPS behaved itself. The route was correct. I was making good time. I passed the first Twin Falls exits, and the familiar landscape of the southern approaches to the city came into view, the bridge over the Snake River, the glow of the city against the sky, the comfortable normality of streetlights and chain restaurants and a Walmart, and all the other things that tell you that you are back in a place that has been thoroughly mapped and thoroughly civilized. And then the app took me off the highway. Not toward Renata's neighborhood. Not toward the east side of town where she lived. It took me west, down a street that ran parallel to the canyon rim, and I followed it because I thought maybe this was just a weird city routing thing. Maybe there was construction ahead or traffic on the more direct route. I had not rechecked the map carefully enough. I was tired and I wanted to get there, and I trusted the app more than I should have. The street the app was taking me down was a normal residential street for the first few blocks. Houses. Street lights. Cars parked in driveways. And then it was less residential, the houses getting more spread out, the streetlights getting less frequent, and then the app said, in 400 feet, turn left, and I turned left, and the street I turned onto was paved for about 100 yards, and then it was not paved. It was gravel. And then it was dirt. And the app was still calmly routing me down it as though this was completely normal. I stopped. I sat in my car on a dirt road in the outskirts of Twin Falls, Idaho, in the dark, with my hazard lights on and my high beams on, and I looked at what was ahead of me and I looked at my GPS screen and I tried to make sense of what was happening. The dirt road ahead of me went maybe a quarter mile further and then, as far as my headlights could illuminate, it ended. Not at a gate, or a building or a property line. It just ended. The ground beyond the end of the road was dark and I could not see what was down there, but I was pretty sure I was close to the canyon rim, and beyond that road there was just the canyon, the Snake River Canyon, dropping hundreds of feet to the river below. My GPS was pointing me straight down that road. It said, "Your destination is ahead." I sat there looking at the canyon I could not see but knew was there. My destination is ahead. In 400 feet. I looked at the darkness at the end of the road and my heart was doing something that I did not like. Not just the adrenaline thud of mild fright. Something slower and more sustained, like a warning that something very deep in my brain was issuing and was very serious about. My phone buzzed. A text from Renata. She said, "Hey, are you getting close? I can start dinner." I said, "Running a few minutes late, sorry." She said, "No rush." I sat for another moment, and then I put the car in reverse and I turned around and I drove back out to the paved street, and I stopped, and I sat and I breathed. I opened Google Maps instead of the navigation app one had been using. I typed in Renata's address. Google gave me a normal route across town. I followed it. I got to Renata's house at 9:42, which was about an hour and 20 minutes later than I should have arrived. She opened the door and looked at me and immediately said, "Are you okay? You look pale." I told her I had gotten a little lost. I did not tell her the rest of it then. I was not ready to try to explain it yet. But over dinner, about halfway through the bottle of wine we opened, I did tell her. And Renata, who is a level-headed data analyst and not someone who traffics in the supernatural, listened to the whole thing without interrupting and then sat quietly for a moment and then said, "Cassie, delete that app. Right now." And I did. I deleted it right there at the table, and we both watched it disappear from my phone, and then we looked at each other, and did not say anything for a moment, and then James refilled our wine glasses. Okay, so let me tell you about the part that came after dinner. Because this is where the story stops being just a weird navigation glitch, and starts being something that I genuinely cannot explain to my satisfaction, regardless of how many rational frameworks I have applied to it. After dinner I went out to Renata's small backyard for some air. It was a clear, cold night, the kind of October night in southern Idaho where the stars are extraordinary, and the air smells like sagebrush and distance. I stood out there for a few minutes thinking about the drive and specifically about that light I had seen in the desert. The pale green phosphorescent light that had only been there for 2 seconds and then was gone. I was trying to figure out what it could rationally be. I had my phone in my hand and I opened Google Maps, not to navigate, just to look at the area where I had been on the highway when I saw the light. The area around mile marker 207 on I-84, south of the highway in that stretch of desert and canyon country. I zoomed in on the satellite view. There was nothing there. Of course there was nothing there. It was desert. Bureau of Land Management land mostly. Sagebrush and rock in the beginning of the canyon terrain. No structures. No roads. Nothing. Except. I want to be very careful here. I want to be accurate. When I zoomed in on the satellite image, right at the area where mile marker 207 would be, about a quarter mile south of the highway, there was something in the satellite image that I could not identify. It was not a building. It was not a road. It was a circular mark on the ground, about the size of, it looked like, maybe 50 to 60 feet across. It was slightly lighter in color than the surrounding desert, a grayish-white circle in the brown earth. The kind of mark that could be many things. A dry lake bed. An old structure foundation. Some kind of agricultural remnant. Rock formation. Any number of completely mundane explanations. But it was perfectly circular. And it was exactly where I had seen the light. I stared at that satellite image for a long time. I screenshotted it and texted it to Renata inside. I said, "Look at this." She came out to the backyard with her phone and looked at the screenshot and then looked at me and said, "That is probably an old homestead or something. There are a lot of those out there." And she was right. There are. That is a completely reasonable explanation. But I could not stop staring at it. Let me tell you about the research I did in the weeks after that night, because I want to be thorough about this and I want to tell you everything I found, both the things that support a mundane explanation and the things that don't. The navigation app one had been using, which I had deleted that night but the name of which I will mention, it was a third-party routing app that I had downloaded about 4 months earlier because a coworker recommended it as being better for rural driving than the standard options. That app had a series of user complaints that I found when I went looking for them about 2 weeks after my experience. The complaints were in the App Store reviews and in a couple of tech forums. They described similar experiences, the app routing people to incorrect destinations, to non-existent roads, to dead ends in remote areas. In several cases, people described the app routing them toward canyon edges or cliffs or bodies of water and presenting these as the destination. There were enough complaints that the app had received a relatively poor rating despite earlier positive reviews, and about 3 weeks after my drive it was quietly removed from the App Store without any announcement or explanation from the developers. I found that removal significant. If it was just a software bug, you fix it and update. You don't pull the whole app without comment. You don't disappear from the store entirely. But maybe I am reading too much into that. App developers abandon their products sometimes. Companies go out of business. Maybe it was nothing. I also researched the area around mile marker 207 on I-84. I could not find any historical record of an exit at that location. I looked at old highway maps from the Idaho Transportation Department, accessible through their online archive. Exit 207 does not appear on any of them. It has never existed. The highway in that stretch runs through terrain that was surveyed and developed in the early 1950s, and the exit numbering reflects the actual geography. There is simply no location at mile 207 where an exit ramp was ever feasible or built. It is canyon terrain. The geography does not permit it. So what was the GPS routing me toward? A road that does not exist, to an exit that has never existed, in terrain where a road would be impossible. And then, in Twin Falls, a real road that becomes an unpaved track that ends at a canyon rim. And a destination pin floating in gray uncharted space. And a pale green light in the desert for 2 seconds that made me want to stop my car and walk toward it. I have 4 possible explanations. I want to lay them all out because I think honesty requires me to give you the full picture and let you make up your own mind. Explanation 1. It was a software glitch. The app was buggy. It had a data corruption issue or a server-side problem that night that caused it to generate nonsensical routes. The exit 207 that did not exist was simply a bad data point, a ghost in the system. The destination in Twin Falls at the canyon rim was another data error, a misplaced coordinate. The light I saw was something mundane that I cannot identify without more information, a drone, a piece of equipment, a distant fire, anything. The circular mark on the satellite image is an old homestead foundation or a geological feature. Everything I experienced that night has a boring technical explanation that I am giving too much weight to because it was a stressful drive and the dark and the isolation made everything feel more significant than it was. That is explanation 1. I want to give it full credit. It is the most reasonable explanation. It is the one that a rational person should default to. Explanation 2. The app was compromised. Not bugged but deliberately manipulated. Someone had gotten into the app's routing data and inserted false route data that directed users to dangerous locations. The canyon rim destination in Twin Falls was not an accident, it was an intentional endpoint that, if followed to its conclusion, would have taken someone off a cliff. The app was pulled from the store when the developers discovered this, quietly, without comment, because explaining it publicly would have been a legal and reputational disaster. This explanation also has a rational framework. It is more sinister than a software glitch, but it does not require anything supernatural. It just requires a malicious actor with access to the app's data systems. Explanation 3 is where things get harder. There are places in the world that are called threshold places. This is not a technical term. It is a term that appears in folklore, in indigenous traditions, in certain fringe academic disciplines that study anomalous geography, in the writings of people who take seriously the idea that physical space is not uniformly consistent, that there are locations where something about the geography, the electromagnetic properties of the ground, the geological features, something Makes the boundary between what is ordinarily real and what is ordinarily not real thinner than it is everywhere else. These places appear in stories across cultures and across centuries. They are almost always associated with specific physical features: canyon edges, deep water, places where the ground opens or drops away, places where the terrain changes dramatically. Places that are borders, essentially. Edges. The Snake River Canyon is an edge. A dramatic one. It cuts hundreds of feet straight down through the southern Idaho landscape, a sudden violent interruption of the plateau, a place where the ground simply stops and the world drops away beneath you. The desert around mile marker 207 where the light appeared is part of the canyon approach terrain, the area where the ground is beginning its drop toward that edge. I am not saying that I believe in portals. I am not saying that I think my GPS found a hole in reality. I am laying out the third explanation the way the people who believe in this kind of thing would lay it out, because I think you deserve to hear it. The fourth explanation is the one I think about at 3 in the morning. The one I do not tell most people because I know how it sounds. What if the navigation app was not glitching? What if it was not compromised? What if it was doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is route you to a destination based on location data, and the location data it was receiving was accurate, and the destination it was pointing me toward was real, just not in a way that our conventional maps register? What if there is something at mile marker 207, something that does not appear on Google Maps or on any ID survey, something that has been there for a long time and that occasionally makes itself known to instruments sensitive enough to detect it, like a GPS receiver scanning for coordinates? And that the app was following legitimate location data to a legitimate destination that simply does not exist in our ordinary understanding of what exists? What if exit 207 is real? Just not to us? Not in the way we understand roads and exits and the physical landscape. What if I was 44 minutes away from something? I had driven past that stretch of I-84 twice since October. Both times I kept my eyes on the road and I did not look south and I did not think about the pale green light. Both times I had a new navigation app running on my phone that was behaving perfectly normally. Both times I was aware, in a specific and unignorable way, that I was passing something at mile 207 even though I was not looking at it. Once I thought I saw the green light again in my peripheral vision. I did not look. I kept my eyes on the road and I kept my speed steady and I went east and did not look back. I asked Renata about the night of my drive again about 2 months later. I called her and I said, "Renata, I know we talked about this, and I know you said the app was buggy, and I know that is probably right. But I want to ask you something. That satellite image I showed you, the circular mark on the ground, did you look it up? Did you ever zoom in on it any further than the screenshot I sent you?" There was a silence on the phone. Then Renata said, "Yes. I did look it up after you left. A few days after." I asked what she found. She said the satellite image I was looking at was from a survey that was done in the 1990s. She had found a more recent satellite image from a survey done in 2021. She said, "In the 2021 image, the circle is gone." She said, "Cassie, in the 2021 image, there is nothing there at all. Just desert. Just plain flat desert, same as everything around it." I sat with that for a long moment. She said, "I know there are lots of explanations for that. Image quality, different lighting conditions, different seasons, the ground could have changed naturally in 20 years. I know that." I said, "Yes." She said, "But I also know that I have been thinking about your drive since October, and I have been thinking about that light you described. And I have been looking at old newspapers from the areas around that stretch of highway. From the 50s and 60s and 70s. I asked her what she found. She said 3 separate incidents. All of them in a 40-mile stretch of I-84 that includes mile marker 207. One in 1962, one in 1979, one in 1994. In all three cases, a driver reported their vehicle behaving strangely in that area. One reported their radio picking up a frequency that broadcast what sounded like voices speaking in a language they did not recognize. One reported their compass behaving erratically. One, the 1994 one, which was in a small local newspaper and was clearly not taken entirely seriously by the reporter, described seeing a pale light in the desert to the south of the highway and having the urge to stop the car and walk toward it. There was a long silence. I said, Renata? She said, I know. I said, exactly where in the desert? She said, the article did not give an exact location. It said south of the highway near the Bliss area. Mile marker 207 is in the Bliss area. I have thought about that conversation many times. I have thought about 3 different people over 3 different decades in the same stretch of desert, their instruments behaving strangely, a pale light in the desert, the urge to stop and walk toward it. I have thought about a circle on the ground that was there in 1990's satellite imaging and gone by 2021. I have thought about an exit that does not exist on any map. I have thought about a navigation app routing me to an impossible location with a confidence that made no sense and then being pulled from the App Store without explanation. I have not gone south at mile marker 207. I do not plan to. But I think about it. I think about what my GPS knew that I do not know. I think about what was 44 minutes south of that spot, through the uncharted gray, through the terrain that the maps do not cover, through whatever is at the end of a road that has no physical existence that I can verify. I think about the pale green light and the pull I felt. The current dragging sideways. How easy it would have been to stop the car. How easy it would have been to walk out into that desert. How easy it would have been to let whatever was out there stop being something I was driving away from and start being something I was walking toward. I think about the fact that I did not do that. That something in me, some functional animal survival instinct, some basic deeply wired self-preservation kept my hands on the wheel and my foot on the gas and my eyes on the road ahead. And I think about the people in 1962 and 1979 and 1994 who also saw the light and also felt the pull and about whom I know nothing further, whose stories appeared in a small newspaper or in someone's private memory, and then were just gone. I wonder if they kept driving too. I tell myself they did. I tell myself everybody kept driving. I tell myself that whatever is at exit 207, whatever is 44 minutes south through the gray uncharted terrain, has been sitting there for a long time and will go on sitting there, and will not come looking for the people who did not turn when the GPS told them to turn. I tell myself that. I sleep with a light on now. I did not used to do that. I am 29 years old and I sleep with a light on because in the dark I sometimes dream about a road. A road that is paved and then gravel and then dirt and then nothing, ending at an edge, at a rim, at a place where the ground stops and the world drops away. In the dream I am standing at the edge looking down, and it is dark and I cannot see the bottom and the navigation app on my phone says your destination is ahead. And in the dream I look at the phone and the destination pin is at the bottom of whatever is below me, down in the dark, in the canyon, in the place the maps do not show. And sometimes in the dream there is a pale green light down there. Moving. Patient. Waiting. And the app says you have arrived. I have not updated my navigation apps in 14 months. I use Google Maps exclusively now, and I stay on the routes it gives me without deviation. I do not take suggested alternate routes. I do not follow recalculations that I did not initiate. I know that sounds like I have control over something I do not have control over. I know that a glitch is a glitch, and no amount of app hygiene is going to protect you from a data corruption event, or a server-side error, or whatever it was that sent me to the edge of a canyon in Twin Falls on a Friday night in October. But it makes me feel better. Having a rule. Stay on the road you know. Do not turn where there is no road. Do not go south at mile marker 207. Do not follow the green light. I have one last thing to tell you. This happened about 3 weeks ago, and it is why I finally sent this story into Bella Dark Tales after sitting on it for over a year. I was at work. I work in an office in downtown Boise, data entry and administrative work for a property management company. Completely ordinary job. I was at my desk when my phone buzzed with a notification from my navigation app. Not a call. Not a text. A navigation notification. Which was strange because I had not been using navigation. I had not opened the app. I was sitting at my desk in my office. The notification said, starting route to destination. I looked at my phone. The app had opened on its own and was displaying a route. A route from my current location in downtown Boise. Going south. Down through the Boise foothills, south on back roads, south through desert country, south toward the Snake River Plain, south toward the canyon country, south toward a stretch of highway I had been avoiding for over a year. The destination pin was in the gray uncharted zone. 44 minutes. I turned my phone off. All the way off. Held the button down until the screen went dark. Sat at my desk and breathed for a moment. When I turned it back on, the app was closed. Everything was normal. My coworker across the desk, a woman named Trish who is thoroughly unspooky, looked up and said, "You okay? You look pale." I said I was fine. I said I had a headache. I went to the bathroom and I ran cold water over my wrists, and I looked at myself in the mirror and I said out loud, to myself, to nobody, stay on the road. I do not know what is at mile marker 207. I do not know what was at the end of that dirt track in Twin Falls. I do not know what the pale green light was. I do not know if the circle on the satellite image was a homestead, or a geological feature or something else entirely. I do not know if the app was glitching or compromised or doing something that neither of those words adequately describes. I know that I stayed on the road. I know that something at the edge of my understanding wanted me to stop and turn and walk south, and that I did not. There was a long silence. I said, "Renata?" She said, "I know." I said, "Exactly where in the desert?" She said, "The article did not give an exact location. It said south of the highway near the Bliss area. Mile marker 207 is in the Bliss area." I have thought about that conversation many times. I have thought about 3 different people over 3 different decades in the same stretch of desert, their instruments behaving strangely, a pale light in the desert, the urge to stop and walk toward it. I have thought about a circle on the ground that was there in 1990s satellite imaging and gone by 2021. I have thought about an exit that does not exist on any map. I have thought about a navigation app routing me to an impossible location with a confidence that made no sense and then being pulled from the App Store without explanation. I have not gone south at mile marker 207. I do not plan to. But I think about it. I think about what my GPS knew that I do not know. I think about what was 44 minutes south of that spot, through the uncharted gray, through the terrain that the maps do not cover, through whatever is at the end of a road that has no physical existence that I can verify. I think about the pale green light and the pull I felt. The current dragging sideways. How easy it would have been to stop the car. How easy it would have been to walk out into that desert. How easy it would have been to let whatever was out there stop being something I was driving away from and start being something I was walking toward. I think about the fact that I did not do that. That something in me, some functional animal survival instinct, some basic deeply wired self-preservation kept my hands on the wheel and my foot on the gas and my eyes on the road ahead. And I think about the people in 1962 and 1979 and 1994 who also saw the light and also felt the pull and about whom I know nothing further, whose stories appeared in a small newspaper or in someone's private memory, and then were just gone. I wonder if they kept driving too. I tell myself they did. I tell myself everybody kept driving. I tell myself that whatever is at exit 207, whatever is 44 minutes south through the gray uncharted terrain, has been sitting there for a long time and will go on sitting there, and will not come looking for the people who did not turn when the GPS told them to turn. I tell myself that. I sleep with a light on now. I did not used to do that. I am 29 years old and I sleep with a light on because in the dark I sometimes dream about a road. A road that is paved and then gravel and then dirt and then nothing, ending at an edge, at a rim, at a place where the ground stops and the world drops away. In the dream I am standing at the edge looking down, and it is dark and I cannot see the bottom and the navigation app on my phone says your destination is ahead. And in the dream I look at the phone and the destination pin is at the bottom of whatever is below me, down in the dark, in the canyon, in the place the maps do not show. And sometimes in the dream there is a pale green light down there. Moving. Patient. Waiting. And the app says you have arrived. I have not updated my navigation apps in 14 months. I use Google Maps exclusively now, and I stay on the routes it gives me without deviation. I do not take suggested alternate routes. I do not follow recalculations that I did not initiate. I know that sounds like I have control over something I do not have control over. I know that a glitch is a glitch, and no amount of app hygiene is going to protect you from a data corruption event, or a server-side error or whatever it was that sent me to the edge of a canyon in Twin Falls on a Friday night in October. But it makes me feel better. Having a rule. Stay on the road you know. Do not turn where there is no road. Do not go south at mile marker 207. Do not follow the green light. I have one last thing to tell you. This happened about 3 weeks ago, and it is why I finally sent this story into Bella Dark Tales after sitting on it for over a year. I was at work. I work in an office in downtown Boise, data entry and administrative work for a property management company. Completely ordinary job. I was at my desk when my phone buzzed with a notification from my navigation app. Not a call. Not a text. A navigation notification. Which was strange because I had not been using navigation. I had not opened the app. I was sitting at my desk in my office. The notification said, starting route to destination. I looked at my phone. The app had opened on its own and was displaying a route. A route from my current location in downtown Boise. Going south. Down through the Boise foothills, south on back roads, south through desert country, south toward the Snake River Plain, south toward the canyon country, south toward a stretch of highway I had been avoiding for over a year. The destination pin was in the gray uncharted zone. 44 minutes. I turned my phone off. All the way off. Held the button down until the screen went dark. Sat at my desk and breathed for a moment. When I turned it back on, the app was closed. Everything was normal. My coworker across the desk, a woman named Trish who is thoroughly unspooky, looked up and said, "You okay? You look pale." I said I was fine. I said I had a headache. I went to the bathroom and I ran cold water over my wrists, and I looked at myself in the mirror and I said out loud, to myself, to nobody, stay on the road. I do not know what is at mile marker 207. I do not know what was at the end of that dirt track in Twin Falls. I do not know what the pale green light was. I do not know if the circle on the satellite image was a homestead, or a geological feature or something else entirely. I do not know if the app was glitching or compromised or doing something that neither of those words adequately describes. I know that I stayed on the road. I know that something at the edge of my understanding wanted me to stop and turn and walk south and that I did not. And I know that it has not stopped asking. Whatever is at the end of that route, 44 minutes south through the gray uncharted places where the maps run out, it is still there. And it still knows where I am. And the GPS still knows the way. And I am very careful, every day, not to ask it to take me there. Stay on the road. Keep driving. Do not follow the lights. And whatever you do, when your GPS tells you to turn and there is no road there, do not turn. Just don't turn. Because the fact that there is no road does not mean there is nothing there. It just means we have not been able to map it yet. And some things stay unmapped for a reason. Oh, Cassie. Cassie. I have been sitting here with the lights on, I want you to know, because what you just described with that notification appearing on your phone 3 weeks ago, that detail right there, that is the one that got me. The app opening on its own. Starting route to destination. 44 minutes. All on its own. After 14 months. That right there is the moment this story went from deeply unsettling to something that I am going to be thinking about for a very long time. Thank you for finally sending this in. Thank you for trusting us with it. And the detail about Renata finding those old newspaper reports, 3 different incidents over 3 different decades in the same stretch of highway, with the same pale light, the same urge to stop, that is not a software glitch. Software did not exist in 1962. Whatever is at mile marker 207 on I-84, it has been there a long time before any of us had a GPS in our pocket. Now I need to ask all of you something, because I have a feeling that Cassie is not alone in this. I have a feeling that there are people listening right now who know exactly the feeling she described. The GPS taking you somewhere it should not. The road that should not exist, but the app is absolutely certain about it. The destination that the map shows is gray and empty, but the route line ends there anyway. The impossible left turn. The edge of something in the dark. If you have experienced something like what Cassie described, we want to hear about it. Drop it in the comments below. Tell us where you were, what app you were using, what you saw. Tell us if you turned. Tell us if you stayed on the road. Because I have a feeling there are more exit 207s out there than any of us want to admit. More places the maps go gray and the GPS keeps going anyway. More pale lights in the desert at midnight. More destinations 44 minutes into nowhere. And I want to find them. I want to map them. Not to go to them, I have enough sense for that. Just to know where they are. Just to know what we are all inadvertently driving past on ordinary Friday evenings on ordinary stretches of highway on our way to perfectly normal places. If you have enjoyed tonight's story, or if it made you double-check your GPS on the way home, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs a good reason to stay on the main road. Your support is genuinely what keeps Bella Dark Tales going, and it means everything to everyone here. And please subscribe if you have not already. We are here every week with something that will stay with you. Your thoughts on Cassie's story, your own GPS experiences, your theories about what is at mile marker 207, all of it belongs in the comments. We read every single one. And if you have a story you need to get out of your head and into the world, please send it to us at belladarktales@gmail.com. Maybe it is a GPS story. Maybe it is something else entirely. Whatever it is, if it happened to you and you cannot explain it, and you need someone to carry the weight of it with you, we are here. This has been Bella Dark Tales. I am your narrator. And somewhere in southern Idaho tonight, on a stretch of federal highway between 2 unremarkable exits, At a milepost that corresponds to a number that does not appear on any official map, something is waiting. Something patient and pale and green and very, very old. Something that has been watching the lights of passing cars for over 60 years. Something that, every once in a while, finds a way to reach into a person's pocket, into the glowing rectangle of a smartphone, into a navigation app that trusts its data and follows its coordinates without asking questions, and whispers a route into the software. 44 minutes. Your destination is ahead. Don't follow it. Until next time. Drive safe. Stay on the road. And if your GPS ever tells you to turn left and there is no road there, keep going straight. Just keep going straight.